cove you see in there with the sand and the steep ledge?
Yeah.
We can go by it a lot. We can swing around and go by it. That's the canyon right there where they found the early Indian points that date back to prehistoric and 6,000 years BC. That's the one where we walked up and in, and there were the lines of ash down in the erosion areas. You know, the lake takes on a whole new perspective, as with our habitation, when the water comes up. Because areas that we showed you last year along near the petroglyph area are 20 feet underwater. The people I've been coaching for water skiing this summer have skied that, I talk about the back bay when you were here last time. There's another whole lake around the corner and this big large back flat area. And that's where we did a lot of our skiing this summer and a lot of coaching, because the rest of the lake was general public for water skiing and any type of water sports you'd like. So when they wanted really good water, we'd take them back up into a back area. Plus with the tournament, we'll come around the outside so you can get a good shot of where the cave's at, where the adamant site is at, what it looks like now with the water up, just starting to drop. We haven't checked it. There may be some new pots showing up right there. Last year we did roughly 18,000 visitors, during our what we call a year-long season. This year we've done 57,000. And a lot of them, we get a lot of people driving and said, I saw it on the Shepherd's Channel. I'm here. Where is it? What do you got? Oh, okay. It was kind of surprising for us, the response we got from your videos.
We have quite an audience that really enjoys what you have here, history of our country, ancient, near ancient. There are a lot of people that still care.
Yeah, even when we didn't catch it, a lot of times I'd catch it on the satellite. Within 2 to 3 hours after it aired, we'd get the messages, the phone would start ringing, and we'd send them out the information on what we had to offer, the campsites, when the tours were, what the weather temperature was. And it seemed like when everybody got up here, they were startled because they expected to find a small lake and a small canyon in a compressed area, and where they planned on spending one day here, one day at Petrified Forest, one day at Grand Canyon, they'd go, uh-oh, we better extend this about 4 more days. This isn't right next door to each other. Hopefully we'll be getting in our trail system around the lake that we talked about when you were here last. It's become closer to reality. Got my funding up, and hopefully within the next 2 years we'll start construction. It's hard to get across to some, hardline law enforcement, hardline administrators, that if I educate them now, when they get to be teenagers, I don't have the problems in the park that we've had in the past. Well, it's not even that. You can imagine Jimmy and Debbie, 7 and 9 years old, come to the park, take the archaeological, the environmental ed tour. They come out with their brothers and sisters and family 2 weekends, and the older brother, Jeffrey, finds an arrowhead and to pick it up. The younger ones are not going to let him do that. They are going to embarrass him so bad that he won't do it. So actually, we use the little kids as a major educational part of reducing our problems.
That's like preventive medicine.
It is, and I made that statement to our environmental ed people, and they said, well, we thought all you did was arrest people, Kevin. Trust me, I'd rather do this than book them. It's a lot easier. This cove here that we were in 2 years ago is the one where we found all of our prehistoric stuff. Our archaeologists that surveyed it just last year have confirmed that that's what we're dealing with, is some areas that date back to habitation to 6,000 years BC. and it's just this small little canyon that goes up. But on both the right and the left to us, over here to the right is the hill that the cave is on, our ceremonial cave is on, and that we've got ruins all around the base of it. So it's the whole area, just the shoreline, is totally tied together with the habitation that took place over the years, and that we had people must have lived here for thousands of years because of the water, which helped create the food, and then with the hills and the cracks and the caves, we've had all this places for habitation and mild weather.
Without the dam, how wide would the river be, say like this time of the year?
The historical accounts, this time of year, you probably had a free-flowing, maybe 10 to 15 foot wide, 5 to 6 foot deep, a lot like your back east rivers, natural flowing rivers. Because even this time of year, now today's a beautiful day, we've got no clouds at all, but normally this time of year, by the afternoon, the monsoons would start coming up out of Mexico. Like we saw last year, we had to run from the lightning. That starts to rain up on this watershed, and that comes down our river. So actually we only have maybe 2 dry months a year where there isn't constant water coming into our watershed. When they put the series of dams in, that's changed everything, because all that water is stored now and then released as needed for agriculture. But you figure this is a 1,500 surface acre lake. That's a mile wide, 3 miles long. That's a lot of water that's stored year round. It's used mainly for irrigation and owned by Lyman Water Company, but they've allowed us to come in and build around the lake shore to produce a recreational area for the public. And for years we've been known as just a water skier fishing lake, with excellent trout coming out up to 7 pounds. So we thought, well, we had all these Indian ruins, and 2 years ago we started, when you folks came out, we showed you the petroglyph tour that we developed. We're now working on a major, archaeological dig where people can come in as grad students and spend a week and dig with us and learn. And then in the wintertime, when the college backs out, ASU backs out, we bring the local school kids in to learn about the environment, about the dig, and about how thousands of years ago people lived here, how they survived, the houses they lived in, the corn that they planted, the animals that they developed, and how they evolved into what, we probably know today as the Zunis or the Hopis.
Mike, you got a bird on that point rock there, I guess.
Yeah, that's a heron. That's probably one of our great blue herons.
That's what's flying across the lake water.
If we get lucky this morning, we'll see the osprey that's out here. He's been feeding and just grabbing huge trout. He clamped into one last week when we were out working with the kids and almost couldn't get off the water. We thought we were going to have to go up and lift him in the boat and peel the fish off and let him fly. Yeah. When you were here a year ago, this whole area we're filming now was stone dry. We were walking through this. You could barely get a boat over the far edge. And now the lake wraps all the way up and around the corner. If you'd like to, we can take a ride up. Maybe catch some of the ospreys. We've got a lot of ducks. We've got an extensive bird population that lives at the lake. This is one of the views up to the cave. Just a little slot. When we're in a hurry, that's the way we go up. Because it's right up there on that straight face. See the flat rock edge right there in the slot? That's where the actual cave entrance is at. This is one of the views up from where the ceremonial cave that we brought you to a year ago. This whole mound that you're looking at is all complete Indian ruins, sites. Every terrace and every little nook and cranny was used as habitation at one time.
right here?
Yeah. Well, no, the upper one. Go up. Up near the top. See that kind of jaggedy dark spot?
Right.
Okay, that's your upper opening. That dark slice just looks like a series of steps or terraces in the shadows right there is the actual opening to our ceremonial cave. We still have burials down in there. There's a lot of artifacts. It's not open at this point to the public because since it is a burial area, it is a religious site for our Zuni and Indian friends that are our neighbors. Just below there, when you were here last year, was where Dr. Murray located the cross that's the petroglyph that's on the side of the hill. Right now it's in the shade on the walk up to the cave. At the time we were here a year ago, we couldn't even do this by boat. This was all dry land out here. The lake was that low after having the dam rebuilt. Yeah, we're going to nose in right over. In fact, you can see the coyote or fox. Diane, you've got a coyote or fox running above the adamantine. There's a coyote or a fox running above the adamantine right over here. I just caught an edge of him. See him right there?
Yes.
That's one of our local wildlife habitat is the coyotes that run along the shoreline. I don't know whether you've got him in view or not. There's so few people. Yeah. Well, there's so few people up here, they're not really afraid of the public. And with the water, they've got all the food they'd ever need to maintain survival.
Yep. He's down on the flat now.
Mm-hmm.
You see?
Yeah, I got him.
Yeah, it's real unusual this time of day, this late in the day, that we'd even see one out in the open. Right up in here, right next to these salt cedars and right up and in, you'll just see some vertical stacked rocks. This is a site referred to as the adamantine site, which is like, we've been told by the petrified forest and the archaeologists there that it's one of three. We haven't even had a chance to check it since the water came down.
What does that mean?
It's a period of time that dates from like 500 AD to 700 AD, and it's a distinctive pottery style that's more of an anvil hammer. It's not very decorative. It's strictly just a colored pottery style. The only reason that we pointed out is the fact that Petrified Forest told us that they had one, there was one other in the state, and none of them had burials. This one here has burials in it. We found a child skeleton and an adult so far. So we keep a pretty close eye on it. If you could swing the boat this way, Diane, if you can. Where we're going to be going today is from this point here, we're going to swing around, if you can do it. Right across the lake is where we're going to be taking a look at today. This is what we've known as Rattlesnake Point. This little peninsula right out here, in relationship to our ceremonial cave, is actually less than 200 to 300 yards across the lake. You have to remember, back at the time when this was in habitation with Indian ruins, that there wasn't a lake here. There was just a small river, and this whole valley was possibly developed in corn, irrigated corn land, because our Indians of this time, the Anasazis, had in a later period had developed irrigation and agricultural farming to the point that they had full crops out here of corn, not as we know of corn in the cob. The small cobs were only 2 to 3 inches long. When we talk about having, going into Taco Bell and buying a tortilla, that was probably 50 of those little corn cobs trying to get a meal out of, ground in the metates. Because we think of corn on a 8, 10-inch corn, 12-inch corn cob. These people's corn cobs were only 2 to 3 inches long at the time, but it was a very drought-resistant corn that from what we understand, some of the Indian nations have been able to take some of the old seeds out of these rune sites, replant them, get them to grow after all these hundreds of years, and that's what we know as the blue corn now. When you see blue corn chips, that was the original drought corn, and if I'm not right, that was taken out of one of the Pueblo sites up around Chaco Canyon. This area they're looking at now, this whole rock fall along this bank is actually what's left over from the original buildings and multiple story buildings. All these flat rocks were part of Pueblo walls at one time. The stacks are what our archaeologists put in, but you can see the flat wall even in the grass up there. Because we have to remember that years back, this was all not underwater. Probably the little Colorado River ran close to here because this ledge this real hard flat ledge that you're seeing from the water side, when we were here a year ago, this is where we showed you the monetize, where they actually sat ground corn, sharpened stones. So we're fairly sure the little Colorado River ran in close because they'd come walk down from the Pueblo with their corn and sit there and grind it. You know, when we first brought the archaeologists out here, we weren't even sure that all this rock was part of Pueblo. Neither were they until they started digging in and realized how the walls were set up. And they're set up in such a fashion that these would have imploded out, actually fallen out into the lake due to the wave action. This summer, when the water was dropping, all new types of artifacts started to show up again. You can come in a little closer, because I can actually step out here and wet these monetize so they show up a little better. Takes me a second to find them. These small pockets in the stone, a lot of them were made by tool grindings. The main monetize, which we'll show you one of those, an actual complete one in a little bit, are probably still on the next ledge down. They haven't even come up yet. That's how high the lake is. But these small upper ones that just look like very small pop marks, you'd think they were actually small indentations or gas bubbles. Well, they're not, because they're too perfectly round and formed to be just an indentation in a rock. Over the years, they've worn a lot more into the rock due to the water and erosion factors.
You want to just tie off here?
Yeah, we can tie off here and go up from here if you'd like to. No, this is a good spot because it's fairly deep.
Let's get some rocks.
Yeah, just get some rocks. Or do you have another length of rope in there, Diane? We'll just go up to one tree and tie off.
Oh, okay.
Even if it floats away, we send Diane back. She walks back and gets a truck. This is Rattlesnake Room Pueblo that we're in and on. It's been a joint project between Arizona State Parks, the college at ASU, and the St. John's St. John's Economic Development Corporation. One of the things we've been striving for here is not just to have just an archaeological site. We've been working to work with the young children in school through an environmental education grant to try to teach them about how these folks lived, the way they had to live, the types of food that they ate, and their interrelationship with the environment, which is what we're talking about now today. Each of us has an interrelationship with the environment, and these kids have to understand that even thousands of years ago, it was important for these people to be very careful with their environment to bring their livelihood. The pottery shards that you see in the bottom of the Pueblo were found in almost the sites where we've got them laid out. The Pueblo evidently burned during a catastrophic incident which burned the whole Pueblo and it imploded. All the walls fell in and the roof fell in on it, which preserved all these pieces. They don't come out in one piece. You've got each one of the pots, you can see where we've glued them back together little by little to try to form the whole pot. Because as the roof fell in and the dirt came in on top of it over hundreds of years, it compressed down and broke the pots. What's really interesting about this room in itself is the fact that it has almost like a flagstone floor, where the Indians that lived here took enough time to actually lay flagstone in so they wouldn't have a dirt floor in their housing. They'd have a hard rock floor, like we think of as a hardwood floor or carpeting. We also have a totally intact firebox, which is their hearth, their stove, their barbecue grill, whatever you want to call it. This is where they heated and cooked at quite a bit during the period of time when they were here. The walls here are all made out of adobe, and they're chinked, and they're flat rocks. Before we ever got a chance to get down to this point, our archaeologist had to remove the large amount of rocks that you see in 1 meter squares. They pile them in 1 meter squares to get an idea of the volume of rock that was here, which tells them how tall the walls were on the Pueblo itself. When we take a look at these wall sections in here, in areas like this, when the people were still here, these wall sections were approximately 2 foot higher and then covered over with large roof beams. That was covered over with a woven matting and then mud on top of that to give them their roof of their house. Most of the entrances were through the roof, down and in. So you had one small opening that the family would come and go out of, and that way it would maintain the heat within the walls during the winter months up here, which can get down, to freezing temperatures at night. When the Pueblo burned, all those roof beams and everything else fell in. They were all preserved here within the Pueblo when we started digging. We found a lot of 6-inch beams, 1.5 feet long, that were totally carbonized. We'll be able to get an exact date of the Pueblo out of that through tree ring dating. The reason you see 2 different levels of dirt within this Pueblo itself is that the school that was here this year that worked for 2 months, this is all they could excavate in that period, very carefully coming down with small trowels, brushes and stuff to make sure they didn't miss any artifacts, any information, made sure everything was designated. So we've only excavated half of this room. And this is like a one-family dwelling. Across the top of the Pueblo here, you have approximately 12 rooms end to end that go from one side of the Pueblo to the other. One of the things we found on the pottery shards here at the park is we've got our standard Anasazi polychrome colors, which gives you a date and a time of Pueblo 1, 2, 3, or 4. One of the unusual things they found with our pottery shards is some of the shards are showing up with a green color besides the red and the black and the white. That green is known as Zuni green and is found 70 miles overland in Zuni and in their pottery today. We have found shards down in this room that have Zuni green in it. It indicates that during the year 1200, 1300, 1400 AD, they had Zuni green here, had somehow come up with it, made it, or traded for it. Hopefully our archaeologists will be able to tie that all together and tell us exactly what's going on during those time dates. We have approximately 100 to 150 rooms on this site. And when we talk about being 12 rooms wide, long, it's also 8 rooms wide, and we're not sure whether it's 1 or 2 story yet. There's still controversy over that, because it seems like when they dig down below the floor, they find more ash level. We know that the surrounding area, all around this Pueblo and in the park dates back to 10,000 years BC. There were people living here, all the way up to what we now know this site is to be roughly around 1400. Well, one of the things we found in the site here was that during this period, Pueblo period, the Indians did cultivate corn, actually had irrigated cornfields. And their way of grinding it is just as we see Diane doing it now. And you literally laid the corn down in the lower piece, which was called a matati, and you can see how it's grooved out from years of work. Now, it takes, I don't know how many years to take two pieces of stone and literally grind a smooth bowl into it, where you could take the smaller piece, which they used as the grinding stone, known as the mono, and grind the corn into a dust and a powder, which we would call flour in our day and age. And this was their basic life subsistence, was this corn. That's why in all of your Indian legends, all of your Indian religions in this area of the country, your Hopi and your Zuni, corn is a very prime thing in their religion, because this was their staple. You know, like we think of our wheat flour and our beef today, for these people, this was life and death, and how they raised it, how they ground it, what they used it in their products. But you can imagine the toll it took on you after grinding the corn down into a real fine powder, the amount of grit and the amount of rock you would have in there, and then you would ingest that through your teeth. That's one of the ways that they can tell whether the people, you know, what they lived on and some of the parts they had. When they do have to look at burials and skeletons, they can tell by the teeth on the people on what type of existence. That's why at 30 years old, these people were very old people. They had a hard life. Because as we think of corn on the cob, when we buy it out of the store and enjoy it today, you know, and it'll be a cob maybe a foot long, these people, corn on the cob, were only 3 inches. You can imagine how many of those corn cobs it took to make a meal when you're grinding that amount of corn. People living within a 1 mile square zone, as we're talking about here, from 6,000 years BC all the way up to 1400 AD. Do you know how many generations of families that is, that had to be fed, had to be sheltered, had to be taken care of off of the land that we see now, right off of here. Now we know they did trade with the other Indians up and down the Little Colorado. In fact, undoubtedly, our Pueblo here, if we talk about relationships and family relationships, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if these people here had family members who were also at the Raven site, who were also at Casa Malapais, and also in the other direction all the way up to the Pueblos and Petrified Forest. Because we're not talking about that much distance. Even today's period, my Zuni neighbors, which are 70 miles to the northeast of us here at the park, they still come overland every year on part of their religious ceremonies and end up here at the park. And they hike overland for a period of time from Zuni to St. John's. It's a known Indian trail, marked national trail, that they come over, religious trail, and they end up here at the park, and then they're trucked back to Zuni. So even in our modern period today, they're still doing their same traveling as part of their religious ceremonies. So it's, when we think of 70 miles, you know, we think of an hour, 2 hours of car time. These people are talking 2 or 3 days, and that was a standard journey for them, the same way as it was for our pioneers that were out here. You know, we think we're the new people here. We're the one that civilized this country. These people have been here since 6,000 years BC. And they're probably still here today. Their ancestors or relations are still here. When we're doing the removal of the dirt out of the Pueblo sites, every bit of dirt that comes out of there is then brought up here to the sifter and sifted through so that we can look for any type of artifacts. We look for pollen. They look for just anything and everything, small pieces, real tiny small pieces of charcoal that'll give them some idea of what went on in the Pueblo. You can imagine the amount of dirt that's been put through the sifters here at the park just for that small Pueblo room. And I mean every bucket that comes out of there will go back through. Oh, what'd you find there?
It looks like a little marble, pea size.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that is. We've got some pieces of pottery.
There's a piece of pottery.
Yeah.
Beautiful pieces of pottery.
Yeah, and that's some of our St. John's polychrome.
Right.
That's very, very common around the park, and a lot of what we're finding at the sites. Each one of these little pieces that are found are later on then numbered, cataloged, and then like a giant jigsaw puzzle in...
Corn cob, isn't it? No.
No, that's a small piece of wood, probably very, very old chunk of some of the small roof beams or matting that came down and in. But each one of these pieces will later on try to be constructed into what the original bowl or pot was. So you can imagine how many thousands of pieces these shards can get in and the work that it takes to glue it back together. That almost looks like bone right there, but it's not. You'll find a lot of small pieces of animal bones, fish bones, just about anything and everything that these people consumed and used. At that point, it will come back out through the sifter. And then by dating it and checking it to find out whether it matches the time frame, we'll be able to tell what the people actually lived on, how they lived, hopefully what their lifestyle was like, and how it related to the area around and the environment and the climate at the time that was here.
Well, we certainly found two beautiful pieces of pottery in there. But that, you know, that piece of wood,
Yeah, that's the type of stuff we were finding when they got down. And you'd find small section of the roof beams, very small section of the matting.
Now this is just stone here.
Yeah, that's our different types of sandstone that we have, and what the Pueblo was made out of. And it shows the different varying colors and patterns, how it was laid together. Now this one even has charcoal on it. See, that one's been burnt on one side and exposed to some heat. Each one of these little bitty pieces that the archaeologists find is just another clue to the puzzle that we use when the school children come out.
And this is St. John.
Yeah, this is one of this type of St. John's polychrome. This might be of the Pinedale type, which you can see how intricate the lines are. And you've got a basic pot that's done in a red glaze, and these were glazed, and then had the black lines on them in different patterns. And sometimes the outside would be the red with black, and sometimes you'd see the black with white on it, depending on which type. Now this pot's evidently been exposed to heat. And what the archaeologists have to prove is whether or not it was the heat from the fire of the Pueblo or actually used as a cooking pot. And that's why we brought ASU in too. They've basically been our guides and the teachers and main instructors on how we do this and our connections with the tribes.
Well, that was fun. Can we do another one?
He had so much fun the last time, he had to do it again, right?
Right.
You just kind of very gently crunch up the chunks.
Oh, yeah, don't beat it with the trowel.
No, because you never know what's in there.
Some of it is very...
Oh yeah, well see, you have to remember that the ground we're dealing with here is the same ground that they made the pots out of. So it's a very hard clay type ground. And embedded in these hard clay type, now see, here's a conglomerate. You got an odd rock, and you just kind of have to work your way down, and then when we get down close and get it, then just take it and shift it back and forth a little bit so we can get some of the dirt out of it and see what starts to show up. But this summer we had approximately 20 to 40 grad students working out here doing just what we're seeing now. Plus, in the past couple of weeks, we've had over 500 school kids come out and help us do this. So they'd understand that when we get them out, when they're out into a public park or out onto a public site, that it's real important that they not pick anything up or disturb it. Because each one of these little tiny pieces of information that'll come out of here is another clue to how these people lived, worked, and survived in the environment. Now here's a real tiny piece of charcoal.
Yeah,
this what looks like just, right. Now see, these little tiny pieces of charcoal, the real tiny round ones are actually the corn kernels that burned. And then some of the other black ones could be wood, off the wood beams. It could have been out of the fires. Let's go ahead and give it a real good shake and try to get some of our dirt out and see what we've got here. Okay. Yeah, there's more of the charcoal. Now here's a piece. This is a piece of chert, which is what you can actually see the edge on here, where they were flaking it off, probably working it for a stone tool or a point at one time.
More charcoal.
Yeah.
Lots of charcoal.
You know, ASU will be running this graduate program again next summer for college students and graduates and people that are interested in taking the classes and learning about archaeology and having hands-on archaeology. Anybody wishing to come to the school or learn about it or take the classes are more than welcome to contact the park here. We can send them the paperwork, or they can contact ASU directly, which is Arizona State University, down in Tempe, and our archaeologist's name is Dr. Keith Kentig, and he's the head of our program up here. Because this has been a really exciting joint partnership between ASU, State Parks, and the City of St. John's. And then the areas the State Parks has been doing it out of is their environmental education program. Because if we don't learn from the past and learn from these people's mistakes, we're destined to repeat them again in the future, which is what we're finding out now with the way we live. I'm not sure what that is either. I'd have to, yeah. Charcoal. During this sifting, we'll find a lot of small animal bones. Sometimes this is where we'll find our Indian points or arrowheads will come up because you'd never even see them in the dirt. And then they take samples of so many meters of dirt and actually do a flotation process in water that floats the pollen and the seeds of that time up to the surface. So they can tell basically what type of plant life was existing way back then. Because the plant life we see now is not the same, you know, as back in 1400 AD.
And that looks like something they might have been using for a tool that
Yeah,
broke.
because see, it's too round. It's too perfect.
It's been worn.
Yeah, that's definitely been used as something. I'm not good enough to be able to tell you what it is. I wish I was. Hopefully next summer I'll be able to take the classes and learn a little more.
It is amazing that just from one bucket full you find out, yes, there was a fire here, there's been cooking, or there was another type of fire here. And yes, there were people here working, making tools.
We found a lot of, already we found quite a few of the different style types of points made out of quartz, obsidian, which is not common in the area. And their craftsmanship, even back during this period, was phenomenal. The points are just almost perfectly like what you'd see, you know, in a history book, or something you'd think that we'd make today with modern tooling.
Well, I can certainly see that it would be exciting for someone that is interested in archaeology, interested in history. And did I understand you to say that college students that are looking to further their career in archaeology could even receive credits in one of your programs?
Oh yes, definitely. This is ASU is putting on an accredited college class, and you know, it's geared toward archaeologists or environmentalists, but almost anybody that's taking any type of college classes that possibly needs credits for an elective or something like that, I'm quite sure that these would be able to be transferred. They need to contact ASU for that, though, because they're the fine-tuning in the school. But it's definitely an accredited class. And then after the season of digging and the work's all done is when the park staff gets together with the local school kids and all of our surrounding communities as far away as White River down on the Apache Reservation, Snowflake, Taylor, Round Valley, St. John's, Springerville, all come bring their kids out, and then we explain what we've done this summer. What we found, what we've learned, actually put them in a hands-on situation to have them demonstrate how we do this. And one thing we've learned for years of working with kids and with the public is it's much easier to educate them on how to take care of and preserve stuff than it is to, in later on in life, try to enforce our will or laws on them. If we start to educate the kids now, we won't have the trouble that we've had in the past with pot hunting and illegal digging.
I know that you're also, as well as a park ranger, and all rangers are policemen in a sense, and I know that you have experience in police work. Isn't it true that if young people are taught to respect the law and have the laws explained to them why it's to protect the things that we all mutually, well, in this case, own or have an interest in, that when they understand that, they're not as quick to go out and break something?
Oh, definitely. Not only just not themselves, they become an inherent shareholder in our public lands and state parks. They feel it's their park. And at that point, it's not just them. They'll keep their friends from doing things that, are wrong. They actually help educate other people on the preservation and why it's so important to keep this stuff for the past. Every time we take a shovel full of dirt out of here and run it through the sifter and find these little pieces, every piece of this information is part of the puzzle that'll help us survive in future years.
Absolutely.
And it's that important to us. Years back, we didn't realize how important it was. There were no laws against it. Like you said, I've done law enforcement, and I've done both sides of it. I've done arrest and convictions on the archaeological laws, and we can arrest forever. What we need to do is work more on our education side of it so that we don't have to enforce. The farthest thing that my park rangers want to do is enforce. We're here to help educate, teach, and make sure everybody has a good time and learns a little bit about their past, because this is our past. Even though we may not be directly related to the Hopi and Zuni, this is our past one time or another.
Absolutely. Well, that's one thing I must say about your program here at the lake. Is it certainly is geared that people of all ages are going to have the opportunity to learn and to respect. And certainly I want to compliment you on the work that
Thank you.
Your entire staff, you and your staff are doing.
Charlene just happened to notice this piece sticking out just right on the surface. And it kind of looked like what would be the grinding stone of a matati, which is the mono. And it is. And this is the type of stuff that we find all over the site, right on the surface, as the ground erodes down. It'll be interesting to see if we can find the second half of it just below it. Charlene's definitely got a good eye. That's what Diane's going to go in just a few more inches and see if it's there. Or sometimes they get separated as they broke. She's got something right there, so we'll... But this is the way the actual excavation is done, is they'll cordon off a small 1 meter square and then slowly remove the dirt down 2 inches at a time using a small trowel and the paintbrush to clear it out of the way, hopefully not breaking anything as they drop down through the area. We do, when we find surface stuff right here, we do make some very small surface collections just to make sure that it is safe. We'll mark down on where it was found at, put a date on it, and let our archaeologists know that this thing popped right out of the surface of the area. We're only about a foot from a main wall, actually where Dr. Murray's hand is holding the mono and his hand's touching. That's an actual outside wall area, the 12 rooms long. It may not be. You never know.
That may be a real good indication that it's part of a mono that broke and
Yeah.
discarded it.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we're going to get lucky today and find the other half. No, that's an upright. That's a wall fall.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Wow. That is fantastic.
You know, Charlene gets the award for good eyes.
It's amazing, like, even in modern time, we have different screens where we grind corn, you know, for a different grade of grind, or fine grind, or coarse grind. And it's amazing how they would use this stone that actually is, in a natural sense, is
almost a screen.
Yeah, that judges the size of the.
And you notice it's almost hand size, which is what mano means in Spanish, is hand.
Okay. You want to put that down here?
No, we'll have to take that in with us now.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll need to go back. Anything that we find directly on the surface out here, we have to remove, because since it is a public park, people are allowed out here 24 hours a day. Unfortunately, not all of our people would be conscientious enough to leave it there. So we'll go ahead and mark it on the maps, let our archaeologists know, and then maybe later on in the dig, they'll be able to find the other piece of it and the matati that it fits. This year, when we started the excavations out at Rattlesnake Point, our archaeologists did a lot of test holes just to see if they could figure out how big it was, where the rooms were, how the walls were laid out. What we found out is that the rooms go all the way down under the lake. That's all that rock fall that we saw along the shoreline. When they dug this particular room right here, they were trying to see if they could get a line on where the outline walls were. But what they found was this is not an outer wall of the Pueblo. This is another inner wall of a room block, and what they discovered was what they think is a ventilator shaft for one of the hearths. And that's why it's so perfectly boxed and showing almost a perfect square. What they didn't find was the hearth, because actually when they were trying to dig the room, the floor of this room still had water running in. The lake was that high at this period of time. So they kind of abandoned it, and they left this wall here intact, because they'll come back in and finish this room in years to come. They also checked this room because this was one of the rooms where we showed pot hunting had actually taken place. There was a depression, dirt had been removed. What they found out was our pot hunters did not want to dig through the room fall rock, so they stopped. And that's why the Pueblo is in such pristine shape as we found it in. It was just too hard to dig, too much work to get the pottery out. But we're hoping to find more hearths in the other room, but this is real significant for archaeologists. Some rooms had it and some rooms didn't, and they don't know why. The reason they leave dirt behind the wall where I'm kneeling right here is to make sure the wall doesn't get too fragile and implode. Because as part of the structure of it, we need to make sure we've got enough support on the walls that when National Park Service comes in and does our stabilization, we don't have any problems with our walls imploding, because these will never be covered up again. These will always be left open for the public to come in and see and understand and learn from and take tours through. You don't have to come to the park to work at the site. You can come to the park and take a tour through the site with myself or Diane or Tom, the rangers that are here, and we'll tell you everything that you're seeing on the tape now and all the new information as it unfolds. And it unfolds daily as we hear from ASU about the artifacts that they've taken back in. One of the first things our archaeologists had to do when they got on site here on the Pueblo was this spring, the weeds on top of the Pueblo that you're just seeing growing back now were over my head. They had to clear these weeds off using hand tools because they can't bring any mechanized tools up here. And then the second thing they did was start to chase these wall lines, which just look like grooves in the dirt right now, but originally this spring, these were all totally covered over with dirt. Before they could ever put a shovel in the ground, they had to know where the edge of a wall was and try to get some type of mapping of what was here. ASU is now producing a really good multi-layered map showing what we think we have here. And that's only per next year when they put the shovel in the ground again, and all of their new information, learning, whatever you want to call it, is totally changed by the next shovel full of dirt. Because each shovel is another whole new world. and can change all their known information into something else in just one bucket full of dirt. It took them over a week to clear just the weeds and chase the wall lines before they ever got to start to dig, with a crew of about 6 people. All of this rock that you're looking at coming down the beach is all from the Pueblo. That Pueblo, from where we were standing, continues all the way down under the lake. Because you have to remember, back during this period of time, during 12 to 1400, there wasn't a lake here. There was just a small river running through a really nice flat valley, which made for excellent farmland and excellent habitation. So this Pueblo grew up from the river on up to the sites that we were at where the digging's going at now. I don't know whether you can see it good. If you stand up in here, you can see some of the original walls up in here. As the lake rises and falls every year, every spring as the water comes up, it totally covers this beach area, and the water will come up and work right against the bottom walls of the Pueblo and start to expose it. And this is the way it's been exposed every year since I've been here for the past 5 years. We find a lot of salvage archaeology, which means there's not much we can do from here down to actually preserve, restore, and take care of what's here. What we do is we come in and the archaeologists remove all the artifacts, gather as much information as they can as the water drops. As you walk along the shoreline here and through the rocks and the flat rocks that were part of the Pueblo walls, you'll find pottery shards, you'll find arrowheads, you'll find metates and monos, everything else that the upper Pueblo where we at and where they're digging we're at, and what we found up there is all found down here in the beach as it erodes. This is another one of their piles of rocks, and this was just taken out of this small area right up here where this wall was. They were doing a test hole, and they just came down. There's another wall line right here, which is part of the Pueblo, and they just removed these rocks down and piled it up to try to get an idea of how many levels were here during the period when our Indians were here.
Three pieces of potsherds along the way. I didn't touch them.
Yeah.
I didn't have a chance to
No, you can walk anywhere along this beach.
And they're going to be there.
They're going to be there. We found some beautiful pieces this spring. In fact, the water was helping us see them because it magnified the colors
Right.
when the water was clear right at the shoreline. See, the plant life that's here now, these tamaris, what they call tamaris and salt cedars, the bright green ones, they were brought in during the 40s under an irrigation control project. So these aren't native. These bright green things that grow along the water aren't native. First thing we have to do is remove the tops of them and then try to make sure the roots haven't damaged the walls in too much as we work around them. We've been leaving this here because each spring the water rises up over all of this. So all we can basically do along the shoreline is salvage. If we look right along the beach here, down along the ground, I lost that one. We had a couple pieces of pottery that were here right at the edge. Here's a small piece of just plain white that appears. You've got a small piece of what's probably animal bone. You can even see the tooth in it. We spend a lot of our time as park rangers walking along the beach looking for this type of stuff to try to be able to tell our archaeologists where we found it, where it is, what's beginning to appear, because with the water erosion that comes and goes, we've actually had whole pots of this style and color come to the surface. Just totally intact because they're completely surrounded by the sand and clay and protected by the water pressure. So once they dry out, they can be gently removed by the archaeologist, and we get a chance to display them up in the office because the patterns are unbelievably artistic. considering we're talking 12 to 1400 AD. It's quite a while ago. What we're actually entering into is the little Colorado River channel here that feeds the lake. All of the water that comes into the Lyman Reservoir is fed out of the mountains above us in Springerville, Greer, Eager, Escadilla, all runs down through those, feeds into the little Colorado River channel, and eventually comes winding down through the valleys and pops out right here. Now on each side of us where the shrubs are at, there may only be about 2 to 3 foot of water, but the channel we're running in now has 8 to 10 foot of water in it right now.
Kevin, thank you very much for having us back again. I want again to compliment you and your staff on what you all are doing here. I can say a job well done, and you're continuing it. If you would like, tell us again who may participate.
Well, Dr. Murray, I sure appreciate you coming back. We had a great time when you were here the first time, and I'm sure glad you had a chance to come back again.
It's been a pleasure.
We just love to have you, and we love to have anybody else that'll come. We can have grad students participate in the actual dig, school children book in to come in and work with us under the environmental education grants. The general public can come out here and camp in our state park, and then we bring them out with tours through the site. So it's anybody and everybody that would like to come out and participate in the past, the future. They can get into the archaeological site. They can come in and do the petroglyph tour with us, which is our 14 rocks that we showed last year on your channel. They can come out here and trout fish, water ski, windsurf, just about anything and everything in a small compressed zone with the luxuries of home at a state park.
Fantastic. I know a lot of them will take you up on that. Thanks again, Kevin. It's been a pleasure.
Don't be a stranger.
We won't.